Red Barrel's recently dropped Primetime 3.0. Previously, we'd seen 2 of the Prime assets in the same trial, but this time around, they've introduced something called Primetime Roulette, which is a new variator that sees multiple Prime assets, but when one leaves, another enters, giving you no peace, essentially. There were 2 new MK challenges as well, and these were Win the Truth in the Fun Park and Incinerate the Relic in the Resort. But more importantly and more relevant to this video, there were also new lore documents to look at and unpack. And my word, there were some amazing ones that may point to something incredible taking place at Signala very soon. But before we jump in, please be aware that there will be spoilers for Outlast in this video. Let's begin. Okay, so the majority of the new documents gave us more information on Liliya. The first is part of the Liliya's history set and is titled The Hummingbird, and it's from George Nichols' journal. If you're not aware of who George Nichols is, he's a CIA agent that was sent by Alan Welsh Dulles, CIA director at the time, to investigate missing funds from something called the Mutual Security Act. George had a theory about Liliya Bogomolova, and Dulles wanted him to track her down. George eventually did find a bit about her, and discovered that she was incredibly, nay, dangerously charismatic, and men would give up everything for her, and one pattern was that these men were incredibly wealthy. They gave all their money, and they even cut off parts of their body for her in servitude. Anyway, George went the same way, and he too fell under her influence, leading to him cutting his own body parts off for her too, and then he went insane. Anyway, at one point, back when he was sane, George Nichols wrote about one of Dulles' friends from Argentina who shared something with him from after the war. Liliya herself was a travelling companion, unwillingly at one point, of a German officer very popular in the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party, by the name of Klaus Werner von Kant. His nickname was Der Kolibri, which translates as the Hummingbird. Before joining the party, he worked as a butcher's apprentice and went on to be very useful for the Nazis during something called the Röhm Purge, also known as the Night of the Long Knives, which occurred back in 1934. This was a 3-day operation in which the then Chancellor Adolf Hitler, under the persuasion of both Hermann Göring and Heinrich Himmler, ordered a series of executions in an attempt to consolidate power. Essentially, the Röhm Purge comes from one of the leading members of the Nazi Party, and his name was Ernst Röhm, and he led the Sturmabteilung. This was the original paramilitary wing of the Nazi Party, and they were instrumental in Hitler's rise to power. The Sturmabteilung were also known as the Brown Shirts, and the leadership of the German military had expressed concern about Ernst Röhm's intention of leading his loyal paramilitaries in a coup. Thus the Purge, or the Night of the Long Knives, took place. Anyway, thanks to Klaus Werner von Kant's involvement in his killing of members of this faction, he climbed the ranks quickly, with his fondness for needles being the thing that earned him the nickname, the Hummingbird. Others thought that the nickname had come from his penchant for what's called tank chocolate, which is essentially Pervitin. This is a methamphetamine the Nazis would take to make them march for longer, but more often than not it would leave them in a temporarily zombified state. As the war was ending, von Kant left with Liliya, but the CIA lost them somewhere in Italy. Now, we've seen already in a previous comic what happened to von Kant. Back in Liliya's youth, she was kept in a cage. A feral child and a Nazi officer found her, cutting off her hand and cutting out her tongue after she slashed his face with a knife, and her tongue had grown back in some kind of miracle. But that's another story. The miracle is said to have happened in Genoa in Italy the night before she was due to be put on a boat and taken to Argentina. She had, using her incredible powers of persuasion, later convinced von Kant's staff to hold him down while she brutalized him. In the new MK trial, reagents have to collect enough gems so that they can get their hands on Liliya's relic, a jar which contains something belonging to Mr. von Kant, most likely an appendage, and they have to throw it into green flames and burn it. On the jar it says 1947, so this lines up with when the above would have happened, but it's been cool to get a bit of new background on Liliya and to have this connect with another trial. In the same trial, in a far part of the resort map, is a locked box. If collecting all available gems in the environment and placing them in the counter, the box opens and inside is a document with the words "confidential notes" on it. This is part of a new subset called Primary Sources, and this one contains inside it the writings, or in this case a poem, written by Liliya, her gospel. In it she references the Bible, she does this a lot, and she mentions the actions of the Levites. It says, "An accounting from the secret heart of the city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Ground to ash was the calf by the prophet for a trial by ordeal of bitter water. The son of the prophet said the calf was born immaculate by miracle from the fire. The Levites killed their brothers. The bitter water rots the womb of the whore who is the city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Be patient. the Levites will kill their brothers and Babylon will fall. So let's look at what Liliya's gospel is talking about here. In the book of Exodus, there was a bit of idolatry going on. Moses had gone up to Mount Sinai and received from God the 10 Commandments, but whilst up there, the Israelites, who Moses had led out of captivity in Egypt and wouldn't stop whinging, started to become restless. They built a golden calf, which came about via a miracle, apparently, after they melted down all of their gold by throwing it into the fire, and they worshipped this golden calf. When Moses came back down, he was not happy and shouted for whoever is for the Lord to come to him. And the tribe of Levi did so. Under the command of Moses, they took up swords and killed 3,000 idolaters. Their loyalty was rewarded, and the Levites were ordained as the priests and caretakers of the tabernacle, which is the tent of the congregation and the earthly dwelling place of God. At the end of Liliya's poem, and within it actually, Liliya talks about a city which reigns over the kings of the earth and to be patient. She's talking about the city of Babylon the Great. This is a symbol of the political, economic, and spiritual corruption all over the world that is in opposition to God's kingdom. She's essentially saying that all earthly empires that oppose God will eventually fall, and to have patience, which makes me think that something is going to kick off in Sinjala. What we'll look at next is Easterman's view on all of this. On the 29th of April 1961, a reagent was pulled out of a trial. He was lucid, much to the surprise of the staff surgeon, who said that the injuries he'd suffered, shattered vertebrae as a result of a burst fracture, said he should be in a catatonic state as the brain would have shut down. Easterman asks for a recording of his voice, and the surgeon replies that he was speaking utter gibberish, words that the surgeon couldn't even recognize. He mentions something called echolalia. Now, echolalia is an involuntary repetition of words or phrases that were initially spoken by someone else. Now, from the trials with Liliya, we hear her speaking, but these words are actually in the reagents' heads. This is Liliya's influence in full effect. Easterman heard these words when attempting to interrogate Liliya, but he couldn't make them out, only being able to describe them as giving him an itch deep inside his ear canal. In a meeting a few days later, Easterman is meeting with Avianos and Scarfiotti, and Easterman is worried. He's still got Amelia on his mind, but he says that reagents are forming a messianic ideation around Liliya. They're starting to view her as some sort of deity. They're letting her get inside their heads. Avianos argues that this is what the idea was, but Easterman hammers home the family archetype. That the whole family archetype thing was supposed to make the reagents think that they are the special child of a chosen family, that they matter. Scarfiotti thinks they should pull Liliya out of the trials until they harden security in the trial environments, which Easterman thinks is outrageous, to which Scarfiotti says that she's having a detrimental effect on surveillance and that things are going missing from the trials, that she is up to something. Easterman suggests a system that tells reagents they are both special and meaningless, and that any prime asset can be their god, and not just Liliya. So the Murkoff board then authorized Project Prime Roulette. Their hope is that having other prime assets in trials amongst Liliya will subvert the deification of her by the reagents. But any signs of echolalia, or auditory hallucinations, are to be given special scrutiny. One small thing to finish this section on is that in every primetime event we've always had these TVs showing what has been a teaser for the next prime asset. So maybe this could be the next one. A little later, a few days after his meeting with Avianos and Scarfiotti, Easterman is once again self-medicating in his office. He's speaking about hearing whispering, no doubt hearing the influence of Liliya. He's taken another Crest formula, a derivative of promethazine. It's an antihistamine normally used to treat allergies, hay fever, nausea, and insomnia. They added chlorine extracted from human skin and tears, which Easterman considers inefficient. The Crest twins claim that this medication mimics the properties of antipsychotics like chlorpromazine, but that it doesn't give the side effect of lethargy. However, the whispers in Easterman's head are still there despite the medication. He tries to write but is suffering from tremors, which he combats by closing his right hand in his desk drawer whilst writing with his left. Pain and focus, he calls it. He also focused his vision on the edge of his razor and writes that with the blade touching his eyelashes, he nearly experienced silence. Maybe this is what led the men under Liliya's influence to mutilate themselves. That only by the act of said mutilation could they make the whispers stop. Maybe we'll see Easterman doing the same for Liliya. Going back to Liliya's mentioning the fall of Babylon, what if Sinjala is the symbol of Babylon, and the reagents are the Levites who will take up arms against the idolaters? Will the reagents arm up and rise up against the staff at Sinjala? Potentially. I can't wait to find out.